You know, usually when you decide to master something physical like, say you want to learn how the human body moves at its absolute peak, you kind of expect there to be a singular, unified instruction manual somewhere.
Right, like a master blueprint.
Yeah, exactly. You figure if you just gather enough expert advice, eventually it'll all sort of snap together into perfect clarity.
Like a puzzle.
Exactly. I mean, you read the chapter on muscles, the chapter on bones, the chapter on the nervous system, and boom, you understand the body.
The assumption there is that knowledge is just additive.
Mhm.
You just keep stacking the facts, and eventually the picture completes itself.
Right. And it feels incredibly logical, but then you actually step into the world of elite movement and physical training, and suddenly you realize that instruction manual is just completely missing.
Oh, totally.
You
We
hand in
did.
100 different pages from 100 different books, and absolutely none of the page numbers match up.
Yeah, it is the absolute definition of a fragmented landscape. I mean, it's
Mm.
incredibly frustrating for anyone trying to find the whole truth about how we're actually supposed to move through the world.
And that actually brings us to the core mission of this deep dive today. So welcome, by the way, to you, the learner. Today, we are exploring this brilliant philosophical and practical framework, and it's drawn from a source document titled The Cow and the Stakes.
Such a great title.
It really is. We are going to explore exactly why piecing together profound truths never quite gives you the full picture.
Right.
And we're looking at how a theory known as ISAI, which is this fascinating framework for understanding human movement attempts to solve this frustration by just fundamentally changing the direction of how we study the body.
It really flips it on its head.
It does, and I can promise you an aha moment today about how you view your own physical self. We're going to completely avoid the usual dense information overload in favor of a single, really powerful mental model.
Which is so needed in this space.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get to the solution that ISAI actually presents, we have to establish just how frustrating the current reality of movement study is.
You have to see the problem first.
Right. So the author of our source points out that every deep system out there holds a legitimate piece of the truth. But, and here's the kicker, they all stop at the edge of their specific piece.
They really do. And the source gives us some very vivid examples of this fragmentation, which I love. Like, if you look at the internal martial arts, practitioners there can genuinely feel the spiral and the sink of the body's weight.
Right, like that grounded feeling.
Exactly. That is a real physical phenomenon.
Yeah.
Or look at the Russian martial arts system.
Yeah.
They profoundly understand the wave of motion and the mechanics of the breath.
Yeah, and then you just cross the street and talk to a biomechanist, and they will completely ignore the breath to show you exactly how the spinal engine is driving the stride.
Totally.
Or you watch an elite dancer, and they live entirely inside the geometry of the physical line. But wait, before we go further, I want to make sure we aren't just dropping heavy jargon here for you listening.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, when the source talks about the biomechanist's spinal engine, what exactly does that mean mechanically? Because, I mean, most of us just assume our legs are doing the walking.
Right. It's such a common assumption. That's a crucial point, and it perfectly illustrates the depth of these isolated truths. The spinal engine theory fundamentally shifts how you view locomotion.
Okay, how so?
Well, most people think of walking like a pendulum, right? Like your legs swing forward to pull your body along.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But biomechanists have actually demonstrated that human walking is driven by the spine.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
The spine?
Yeah. When your spine laterally flexes, so when it bends side to side and rotates, it actually forces the pelvis to swing forward.
Oh, wow.
In this model, your spine is the engine and your legs are basically just the spokes of a wheel catching your fall.
That is wild. So the biomechanist has perfectly mapped the gears of the spine, and then the internal martial artist has perfectly mapped the fascia network that allows for that spiral and sink feeling.
Exactly.
Each of these disciplines is entirely real. None of them are wrong.
No, not at all. A good coach from any of these disciplines can look at a movement and feel when a body is whole and when it's, fighting itself.
But, and I mean, this is the massive but that drives this entire document. None of them is the whole thing. It's like having all the most pristine gears of a luxury watch laid out on a table, but having absolutely no idea how they fit together to actually tell time.
That's a great visual.
Right. They are beautiful, functional pieces of engineering, but they aren't a watch.
I see where you're going with that watch analogy, but I actually want to push back on it a little bit.
Oh, okay, go for it.
Because it highlights the exact trap the source document is warning us about. Think about it. A watch is a machine. A machine is assembled.
Right, from parts.
Exactly. You take a gear, you add a spring, you put them in a casing, and you create a function that didn't exist before. The underlying assumption in your analogy is that biological movement works the same way.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, that if we just figure out how the spinal engine gear connects to the breath wave gear, we can build a functional human body.
Okay, that's totally fair. But if I have a broken spark plug in my car, I don't need to look at the whole car. I just isolate the spark plug, replace it, and the machine works again. Why isn't the human body like that?
Because a biological organism is not a machine. A machine is built from the outside in, piece by piece. A living body grows from the inside out, from a single cell into a complex whole.
That is such a fundamental difference.
It changes everything. The failure to merge all these incredible truths from biomechanics and martial arts isn't due to a lack of pieces. It's not that we're just missing one final biological gear.
Right, so what is it then?
The failure comes from a fundamental error in our perspective. It is entirely about which way you are facing when you start the work.
And this brings us directly into the core metaphor of the entire document. This is the image that makes this whole problem of fragmentation suddenly clear for you. The author states, "You can cut a cow into steaks, but you cannot build a cow out of steaks."
It's a stark, slightly visceral image, but man, it captures the reality of biological study perfectly.
It really does.
A cow is a whole, living, breathing organism. You can absolutely take it apart into steaks. You can have magnificent cuts of meat, correctly sectioned, each a real piece of the animal.
Right, grade A steaks.
Exactly. But no matter how many steaks you gather, no matter how perfectly you align them on the butcher's block, you cannot assemble them back into a living cow.
Because a cutting only runs one way.
Exactly. The whole can be divided into parts to understand it, but the parts can never be reassembled into the whole.
Right, because it's missing something.
Yeah, because the whole was never just a sum of parts to begin with. It was alive. It had a unifying life force, an organizing principle that the pieces simply do not carry.
Once it's cut, it's gone.
The moment you make the cut, that vital unifying whole is gone from the pieces forever.
And the author believes this is exactly the situation in the study of human movement today. All those deep systems we just talked about, they each hold a stake.
A very good steak.
Right, it's a genuine, perfectly cut piece of the whole. The martial arts spiral is a stake. The biomechanist's spinal engine is a stake. The breathing mechanics, the dancer's line, all real, all true stakes.
Yes, absolutely.
But they were pieces of a whole that was already taken apart before anyone even picked them up to study them.
Which means modern movement science is basically trying to build a cow out of steaks. You are standing at the butcher's counter, gathering the finest, most scientifically verified cuts of meat, hoping that if you just stitch enough of them together, the animal will suddenly stand up and walk.
But wait, I have to offer some genuine pushback here because I know what you're thinking as you listen to this.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the biomechanist has a true stake and the martial artist has a true stake, why can't they just pool their resources? Like, why can't we create some highly optimized, multidisciplinary clinic where we stitch the spinal engine together with the breathing mechanics like some sort of optimized Frankenstein monster?
What's fascinating here is that the author anticipates that exact instinct.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The instinct to synthesize parts is just deeply ingrained in us. But the difference between a collection of parts and a living whole isn't about cleverness.
It's not about being smarter.
Not at all. It's not about finding one more missing piece of data or hiring a better biological surgeon to stitch the concepts together. It is entirely about direction.
Direction, okay.
The moment you isolate the spinal engine from the breathing wave to study it in a lab, you change its nature. You cannot arrive at the living whole by collecting isolated pieces because you are facing the wrong direction from the very start.
Wow.
Life and living movement is not an additive property of meat.
Life is not an additive property of meat. That is incredibly profound. I mean, if you've ever gone to physical therapy for a tweaked knee and the therapist spends the whole session working on your opposite shoulder and your hip alignment, you've experienced a tiny glimpse of this.
Exactly. They see the connections.
Right. They know the body operates as a whole system, not isolated joints. So how does the framework of ISAI actually fix this directional problem?
Well, ISAI does the exact opposite of the traditional scientific approach. It begins from the other end.
From the cow.
It begins from the living cow, meaning it starts with the complete living picture of the body in movement, where spirit, structure, intention, and motion are entirely one thing.
Everything all at once.
Yes. It demands that you see the whole organism interacting with its environment first. And it only cuts downward into anatomical parts when a specific explanation is needed to clarify the whole.
So the parts come out of the whole. The whole is not made from the parts. Mechanistically, that makes total sense. But wait, practically speaking, how do you study the whole without looking at the parts first?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Because if I want to fix my golf swing, don't I have to isolate my shoulder mechanics? If a system claims to start with the whole cow, how do we know this isn't just some salesman's daydream? Every mystic on a mountain claims to see a, universal whole that the rest of us just don't understand.
And that is the exact skepticism we should all have.
Okay, good.
The author explicitly invites that skepticism. Anyone can claim a vision of the whole. So what separates a real, robust, scientifically valid theory from a beautiful daydream?
Right, what's the difference?
The source document outlines that a good theory is born in 3 distinct phases, in order, and it absolutely must pass through all 3. You can't just stop at the vision.
Which brings us to how a theory is actually built. Okay. Phase 1 is the vision.
Yes. The whole comes first, and it comes as a seeing, an intuitive grasp of the entirety, not as a mathematical sum of parts. And the source points out that this is true of almost every real scientific breakthrough in history.
The historical examples they provide are amazing, but I want to make sure we understand how they actually worked.
Let's get into it.
It's not just that these scientists had dreams, it's that the vision provided a mechanical solution they couldn't find by just adding up parts. Take Einstein, for example.
Classic example.
Right. He didn't arrive at relativity by stacking up existing equations. He actually visualized himself riding alongside a beam of light.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. He saw the whole mechanical relationship between light and time first, and then spent years inventing the math to explain what he had already seen.
Exactly. Or look at Darwin. He saw the whole metaphorical tree of descent, the interconnectedness of all life, decades before the specific microscopic mechanisms of genetics and DNA were ever discovered.
Oh, decades.
Yeah. The vision is apprehended whole. And to back this up, the source leans on a very serious study by the French mathematician Jacques Hadamard.
Oh, the psychology of invention guy.
Right. He surveyed the leading scientists of his day to figure out how invention actually happens in the human brain. He wrote a famous text called An Essay on the Psychology of Invention in the Mathematical Field.
And Hadamard broke this process of discovery down into 4 specific stages, right? Preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification.
Correct. So first you have preparation. And to be clear, this is not sitting around waiting for inspiration.
It's hard work.
It is the long, conscious, grueling, saturating work on a problem. You study all the stakes.
You got to know the meat.
Exactly. Then comes incubation, where you walk away.
Yeah.
Your conscious mind lets go, but your subconscious goes on working, looking for the underlying pattern.
And then comes the 3rd stage, illumination, the aha moment.
Exactly. The sudden, unforced arrival of the answer. And as Hadamard and countless scientists testified, it almost always arrives as a single, coherent whole.
A complete picture.
Yeah, it's an image seen in the mind rather than a sentence spoken or an equation solved line by line. And finally, you have verification. The intense, often tedious labor of actually proving what was seen in the flash of illumination.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because if you look at the famous historical flashes of illumination mentioned in the text, in every single case, the answer arrived as a completed image that solved a mechanical problem.
Always.
It never arrived as a fragmented piece of a puzzle.
The famous stories illustrate this perfectly, especially in chemistry and physics.
Yes. Let's look at Auguste Kekulé. He was struggling with the chemical structure of the benzene molecule.
That was a huge problem at the time.
Huge. For years, chemists were trying to arrange the carbon and hydrogen atoms in a linear chain, like adding parts to a machine, but the math just wouldn't work. The valency, the way the atoms bond, was just wrong. Then, Kekulé famously dozed off by the fire and had a vision of a snake seizing its own tail. He woke up and he had the answer: a closed ring. The visual image of the whole ring solved the mechanical problem of the bonds.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see the exact same thing with Niels Bohr.
The atom guy.
Yeah, he's trying to figure out the structure of the atom.
Yeah.
He is said to have dreamed of a sun with planets wheeling around it in specific orbits. He woke up with the structural picture of the quantum atom.
From a dream.
Or Mendeleev, who had a dream that revealed the entire periodic table. I mean, a vision so complete that it allowed him to leave blank spaces for elements that hadn't even been discovered yet. He predicted their exact atomic weights.
That still blows my mind.
But notice what Mendeleev soberly admitted afterward. That dream only came because he had been obsessively working on the problem for a very, very long time.
Right, which brings us to the crucial guardrails of Hadamard's theory that the author emphasizes. First, the illumination comes only after long, grueling preparation.
You have to do the work.
You don't just sit on a beach, sip a margarita, and dream up the periodic table without deeply knowing chemistry. Second, the vision is worth absolutely nothing until it is verified.
That's a phenomenal quote from the text, actually. Vision without rigor is only mysticism, but rigor without vision is only cataloging stakes.
Oh, I love that.
You need the living cow first, that intuitive grasp of the whole, but then everything else is the labor of explaining what you have already seen using the hard tools of science.
So the vision hands you the whole animal. But a vision is only phase one. It's only the beginning. Okay, so the founder of ISAI, has this vision of the whole body in harmonious motion. But how do you translate that mental image of a living cow into actual testable physics?
That's the hard part.
Right. Which brings us to the grueling work of phase two, the science.
Phase two is the process of translating "I see this" into "here's why this is so." It's the process of grounding that initial vision in the hard realities of biomechanics. It has to connect to what is already known about anatomy, physics, and the nervous system.
And this is where we have to explain some of the specific mechanisms the source mentions. Because ISAI isn't just a philosophy, it claims to understand things like tendon springs and trunk pressure.
Right. Very specific mechanical terms.
So let's break those down. What does an ISAI practitioner actually look like when they move, and how do these mechanisms explain it?
Well, if you watch someone truly practicing a whole body framework like this, they don't look like they're moving a collection of isolated joints.
They look different.
Yeah, they look fluid, unified, almost like an animal effortlessly navigating uneven terrain. And the science of how they do that relies heavily on mechanisms like tendon springs.
Like a literal spring.
Exactly. Think of a kangaroo. A kangaroo doesn't muscle its way across the outback.
Yeah.
It bounces using the massive elastic storage in its tendons. Humans have this too, primarily in the Achilles and the whole fascial network.
But traditional fitness usually isolates that, right? Like doing calf raises to make the ankle stronger.
Exactly. That's studying the stake.
Yeah.
ISAI, looks at the whole cow. It recognizes that to properly load the tendon springs in your legs, you need what they call trunk pressure, or intra-abdominal pressure.
Yeah, okay. What does that feel like?
You have to turn your torso into a solid, pressurized cylinder using your breath and core architecture. If your torso is soft and unpressurized, the energy from your legs just leaks out through your middle. The tendon springs can't recoil.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
ISAI, maps how the nervous system coordinates this globally. The breath creates the trunk pressure, which stabilizes the spine, which allows the tendon springs to load and release effortlessly.
That is fascinating. It's all entirely interconnected, and the author is incredibly transparent about this scientific process, too. It's patient, humbling work.
Very humbling.
They state that when you hold a vision up to the anatomical evidence, some parts of it might not survive, and if the evidence doesn't support it, you just have to cut it. The author even admits to carrying claims for years that they eventually had to let go of because the biomechanical evidence just wasn't there.
This raises an important question about intellectual honesty.
Oh, totally.
In a world full of fitness gurus claiming absolute perfection, the author of this framework draws a very strict line. What remains, they can ground in physical evidence. But whatever they cannot yet prove, they mark plainly as a proposal, not as a fact.
That's rare.
They argue that this line between what is established science and what is still a proposal waiting for proof is not a weakness in the theory. It is the definitive sign that a real, rigorous mind is at work.
So what does this all mean for phase 3? Because we have the vision, we have the science, and the final step is phase 3, the experiment. This means the theory has to make specific predictions that could actually prove it wrong, and someone has to do the formal laboratory test.
Exactly. And the author is very plain-spoken about where ISAI currently stands. They note that they and their students have decades of real-world practice.
Real-world results.
Right. That practice is a form of empirical evidence. It shows that under real chaotic conditions on real human bodies, the system works. People move better, they heal faster, and they generate more power.
But, and this is a huge but, that the author fully acknowledges, Practice that works in the gym is not the same as a mechanism that is proven in a lab.
No, it's not.
The formal scientific experiments that would show exactly why it works on a cellular or neurological level, the experiments that would confirm or refute the deepest claims of the theory, those are still ahead.
Yes, they are.
The author knows what those experiments are. They can literally name them, but they haven't been funded or executed yet.
Which tells us exactly the status of this theory. The vision, phase 1, is complete. The whole cow is in view.
Right.
Phase 2, the science, is well advanced. It rests on established anatomical ground, with the unproven edges honestly marked as proposals.
Right.
But phase 3, the formal, peer-reviewed experiments, are named and waiting. It is a living research program.
I have to say, marveling at the vulnerability required for a creator to admit that their formal experiments are still ahead of them, it actually builds way more trust for me than if they claimed absolute perfection.
Absolutely.
We are so used to movement coaches claiming they have the final, ultimate, 100% scientifically proven truth. Admitting that the hardest tests are still in view is just incredibly refreshing.
It is a far more advanced and honest position to be in. It is infinitely better than having a pile of scientifically verified steaks but no idea how the cow walks.
Totally.
And it's better than having a vision of a cow that the owner refuses to ever put to the test out of fear it might be proven wrong.
So synthesizing all of this, where does this leave you, the listener, the learner, who is just trying to figure out how to operate their own body?
The ultimate takeaway here is that you aren't being asked to blindly believe a new guru. You are being asked to do something much more challenging and interesting. You are being asked to look at a whole living picture of how the body moves and then to test it on the only instrument you can actually trust, your own physical body.
I love that.
The author says, bring the stake you already hold. The knowledge you already have, whether it's from yoga, weightlifting, physical therapy, is real and it will have its place. But do not expect to have seen the animal until you have zoomed out and seen it whole and alive.
Not a better steak. The cow. It completely changes the paradigm. If you've been spending your life trying to stitch together the perfect movement practice from 100 different fragmented disciplines, this deep dive is your permission to stop facing the butcher counter.
Right, turn around.
Turn around, look for the living animal, and start your study from the whole.
It's a powerful shift in perspective. It honors the preparation and the rigorous science, but it absolutely demands the vision first.
It really is. And it leaves me with one final thought to mull over, which goes far beyond just physical movement and biomechanics.
Oh, where are you going with this?
Well, if our current understanding of physical training is largely just a collection of disconnected stakes, it makes you wonder what other major areas of human knowledge are we currently trying to build from the butcher shop up.
Oh, that's a great point.
Think about modern medicine, where we have a specialist for every single organ, but we really struggle with systemic diseases. Or psychology. Or even our education system, where we teach math, history, and science in totally isolated silos.
Wow. Yeah, separated completely.
Are we frantically collecting pristine parts, completely missing the living whole of the human experience?
That is a very profound question to carry forward into almost any field of study.
It makes you look at that pile of instruction manual pages we talked about at the very beginning in a completely different light. Maybe the manual isn't missing pages at all. Maybe it was just written about the wrong thing entirely.
I think you might be right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the framework, keep connecting the dots, and above all, keep searching for the cow, not just the cuts. Catch you next time.